is going to lie in the neck like this, and they describe it as a butterfly-shaped gland. Okay, the right lobe is typically a little bit larger than the left lobe, and if you see how it kind of lies, it's not completely sagittal when you're scanning. It's going to be kind of pointing outwards, so both the top superior poles are going to point out. So if you're taking cuts through it, and it looks like this, so you start off, right, we're scanning transverse because we want to do the first picture, which is transverse midline. So we're going to have to kind of scan up and down the neck until we find the midline where the isthmus is small. You see how that looks? Transverse, where you've got the two lobes. So this is why it looks the way it does when you're taking a transverse cut, because you're cutting right through the center. And after we do that, right, we take that isthmus picture, we put the color on there, right, we measure the isthmus, then we're going to slide over, and you're going to use the linear probe, right, and so you're going to have better resolution. That's the reason we switched to the linear probe, right, and we're going to go over and you're going to take that midline just to get a base as to what you're looking at. And then when you do superior, you're just going to slide up from that point. I did cut it a little too soon, maybe. So when you slide up from your midline, you're going to scan all the way through the tissue. And then when you move up, you're going to get a little piece of the tissue, and it's going to look like that. So that's your superior piece, okay, for the most part. Then we said when you go down, sometimes what ends up happening is the isthmus is a lot thicker and the lobes are a little kind of squatty. And you know this isn't midline because the isthmus is too thick and the lobe is very squatty. So we want to make sure that we avoid that, but we want to also evaluate the inferior portion. So superior is going to look like a little piece of tissue. The midline, no, I just botched it, but you're right. The midline is going to have the small, thin isthmus, right? And when you take the mid of this particular lobe, that's where you're going to do your measurements from top to bottom. I go with the longest portion and straight up, and then the widest portion and straight over, okay? And that's also going to be where your isthmus is the thinnest. So whenever you're going to superior or inferior, start by reproducing this midline. Take the measurements, take the color picture, move up, get a little piece of tissue, superior, move down, a little inferior. And then let's look at what it would look like when we're doing sagittal cuts. Again, you've got that butterfly-shaped gland right there in the neck, right? And this is going to be a little bit harder because again, you have to kind of move around. Let's say, you know, I don't know, and I'm scanning like this. What I'd be doing here was getting an oblong piece, but it's definitely not as long as it should be, right? Can you see that this would still give me that kind of little boat appearing thyroid, but I'm not quite getting the long axis. So how do you know? You just have to keep on moving. Just keep on moving, sliding it around, and keep in mind that it's on somewhat of an angle, so that when you cut through and you get that long axis, it's going to look like that, okay? So whenever you can get it as long as you can possibly get it, and usually the right side is probably going to cut off of the display. You're not going to be able to get each tip on the display when you're using that linear probe. You can open up the sector width, and even then you're still probably going to cut off a little bit of it, but again, it's going to be the longest you can get it. So you're going to take a picture like that with the color, with the measurements, and it's the longest you can get. And then when you're doing your medial and lateral, you reproduce this picture, and then what I do is once I find my alignment, then I just move out a little bit, and I'm going to lay this all out so you can see. And then as you're scanning through, you're going to see a smaller kind of boat appearing structure. It's not as long and it's not as thick. And then you're going to angle in medial and you're going to get, again, less tissue. So if we were to scan through it, okay, our longest, and let's just, piece, when they were all sitting together, is our midline. When we angle out just a little bit, that's our lateral. It's a little bit smaller. And when we angle in medial, sometimes it's a little bit thicker at one point, and there's a little bit of shadowing from the trachea, but that's what your 3 pictures should look like. If ever you're scanning and one of these is larger or longer than this, then you were off alignment. So it's so important that you actually find the long axis and always reproduce this long axis and then move out a little lateral or in a little medial. Okay, does that kind of give you a visual?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's, and then you would do the same on the other side. And if you have to switch probes, then you're going to be dealing with something that looks like this. It's going to look teeny tiny at the top, but you're going to be able to at least see where it begins and ends eventually. We'll work on the resolution of that. Okay, any questions on this?